We were born from a dying sun's final whisper. It was not a roar of fire and fury. It was a slow, tired sigh across the system. Our star had grown old and red and bloated. It began to touch the inner worlds with lazy, burning fingers. We watched our sky turn from a brilliant blue to a permanent, angry orange. The promise was not a gift from the universe. It was a desperate pact we made with ourselves. A new home was waiting somewhere in the deep dark. We just had to have the courage to reach for it. Our world's last days were not filled with panic. They were filled with a strange and quiet purpose. Every mind, every hand, was turned to the great escape. We knew we could not save our planet, but we could save the idea of it. We could save its memory, its soul, the greatest minds gathered to solve an impossible problem. How do you bottle a civilization? How do you carry a world on your back across eternity? The answer was a ship, an Ark. It was built from the bones of our dying cities. Every recycled girder held a story. Every fused plate was a tombstone for a place we once loved. Our sun pulsed in the sky like a failing heart. Its light cast long shadows as the Ark grew. It rose from the dust of our collapsing world. A single gleaming needle pointed at the stars. It was a monument to our stubborn refusal to fade away. We believed we deserved more than a fiery end. We believed in the echo of a promise made long ago. We heard that promise in the solar winds. It was a tune played on the strings of gravity. A new dawn waited for us, somewhere. We would carry the ghosts of our past to that new shore. We would give them a new sunrise. This was the oath that fueled us. It was the fire that burned brighter than our dying star. We were a people of broken things. And from those broken things, we would build a future. The Ark of Memory was its name, a fitting title for a vessel carrying our entire past. It was less a ship and more a flying museum, a seed bank for a culture that had lost its soil. We carried our history in threads of light. Our art, our music, our stories all became data. They were digital ghosts haunting the ship's memory cores. They whispered to us in our sleep. They reminded us of the warmth of a sun we would never feel again. We lived in metal corridors under artificial skies. The ship's engines were a constant low hum, a lullaby for generations who knew nothing else. We learned to find comfort in the steady vibration. It was the only proof that we were moving, that we were not just hanging motionless in an endless night. We grew our food in spinning gardens. Hydroponic farms glowed with soft purple light. The food was nutritious. It kept us alive. But it never tasted of home. We all knew it. No one ever said it. It would be like complaining the lifeboats were not luxury liners. Our children were born in the Ark's sterile med bays. They took their first steps on cold Durasteel floors. They learned about trees and rivers from glowing screens. They knew the chemical composition of soil, but they had never felt it between their fingers. Their world was one of recycled air and filtered water, of routines and simulations. Their bedtime stories were legends of a world with a real sky, a world where rain fell and winds blew. We tried to make it real for them. We really did. Sometimes the digital ghosts would walk among us. Holographic projections would flicker to life in the common areas. A famous poet might recite her work in the library. A lost soldier might stand silent watch in the engine room. They were echoes of people long since turned to dust. We kept them with us to remember what we were fighting for. We were not just preserving ourselves. We were preserving them too. Every soul we had ever been. We were the last librarians of a forgotten world. And our book was almost too heavy to carry. Generations were born. They lived. They died. all within the cold embrace of the Ark. The long silence became our only companion. Outside our hull was a perfect, unending blackness, a quiet so profound it felt like a physical weight. We measured our lives in cycles of artificial light, in the slow, inevitable decay of ship components. Our only song was the hum of the life support systems, the whir of the recyclers, the soft chime that announced a new shift change. We became a people of the twilight. Our eyes grew accustomed to the dim corridors. Our ears grew sharp, listening for any change in the ship's rhythm. A new rattle in a ventilation shaft was major news, the primary topic of conversation for an entire cycle. We had a betting pool on which component would fail next. The nutrient paste dispenser was a frequent favorite. Its sense of humor was legendarily bad. It once made everything taste like beets for a week, a dark, dark week. The stories of home began to fade. They shifted from history into myth. The earth, our cradle, became a paradise of the mind, a place of impossible wonders, vast oceans and towering mountains, creatures of fur and feather, a sky that changed colors with the time of day. The children would listen with wide eyes, but for them, it was just a fairy tale, a beautiful story to help them sleep in the long, artificial night. Their reality was the ship and the silence. The silence seeped into our souls. It shaped our culture, our beliefs, our art. We painted murals of star fields on the bulkheads. We wrote poems about the beauty of absolute zero. We learned to see the void not as an enemy, but as a canvas, a place where anything could one day be painted. The silence was not empty. It was full of potential. It was the quiet before the dawn we had been promised. We held on to that belief. It was the only thing that kept the crushing darkness at bay. Then, after an age of quiet, a whisper. It was not the hum of the ship. It was not the phantom voice of a digital ghost. It was something new, something from outside, a signal. It sliced through the long silence like a shard of glass. It was faint at first, just a flicker of static on a forgotten frequency. A ghost in the machine that was not one of our own. The sensor array, old and patient, had finally caught a fish. Our hearts hammered against our ribs. For generations, we had known only our own echo. To hear another voice in the void was impossible. It broke every law of our lonely universe. The signal was weak, but it was undeniably real. A structured pattern pulsed from the darkness ahead. It was a language we had never heard. It did not follow our rules of mathematics or logic. It was a string of elegant, alien poetry. And it was calling to us. The bridge of the Ark, usually so calm, was a storm of activity. Technicians scrambled over their consoles. Their faces were pale in the glow of the screens. They rerouted power. They amplified the signal. They tried to make sense of the beautiful, terrifying noise. It was not aggressive. It was not demanding. It felt curious, like a child calling out in a dark room, wondering if they were alone. We knew that feeling all too well. The whisper grew louder as we traveled. It resolved into a complex tapestry of sound and light. It was more than a simple radio wave. It carried emotion. It carried images we could not quite see. It felt of immense age, of a sadness we could not comprehend, and of a hope that mirrored our own. For the first time since we left our dying sun, we were not alone. And that knowledge was the most wonderful and frightening thing we had ever known. We had sailed an ocean of silence for centuries, and we had just heard a siren's song. The council of sleepers was awakened. Their chambers, sealed for centuries, hissed open. Icy mist coiled out into the corridor. The founders of our journey, our ancestors, emerged. They were ghosts of a different sort, not digital, but flesh and blood, preserved in a frozen dream since the Exodus began. They were relics from a world of sunshine and open air. Their eyes blinked slowly, adjusting to the dim light of the Ark, adjusting to a future they had only imagined. They were brought to the council chamber, a grand room with a star map projected in its center. The Ark-born commanders stood waiting. We, who had known only the ship, faced them, the creators of our world. The contrast was stark. They were taller, broader, products of a heavier gravity. We were slender and pale, children of the void. They looked at us with a mixture of pride and pity. We were the fruit of their desperate gamble, and we had survived. The signal was played for them. The strange melodic whisper filled the chamber. The sleepers listened, their ancient faces unreadable. They had planned for every contingency: engine failure, plague, mutiny. But they had never truly planned for this. Contact. Their protocols were theories written in a different universe, a universe where we were the only voice. The debate began. It was a quiet storm of measured words and heavy thoughts. First sleeper, Alara, spoke with a voice like rustling leaves, a voice that remembered wind. She urged caution. The signal could be a trap, a lure for a predator that hunted in the dark. To deviate from their planned course was a risk that could waste centuries of travel, a risk that could extinguish humanity's last light. She spoke of the promise of a safe harbor, a new Earth. They should not be distracted by strange songs. Some thought she was wise, others thought she was a coward, but everyone listened. She was, after all, one of the people who had pressed the launch button. Then came Yorick, the youngest of the sleepers. His eyes still held the fire of their dying sun. He argued for hope. What if this was not a trap? What if this was the very thing they were searching for? A greeting, an invitation, an answer to the question that had haunted them for ages. Are we alone? He said the promise was not a destination. It was the journey itself, the quest for connection. To ignore this call would be to deny their very nature. To hide in the dark would be a betrayal of every soul they had lost. The council was divided. The sleepers, with their memories of a lost home. The Ark-born, with their lifetimes of silent travel. The debate raged for days. We watched the projections. We listened to the arguments. Our entire future rested on this decision: to remain on the path of lonely survival, or to turn toward the unknown whisper, to turn toward a potential salvation, or a swift and final end. We held our collective breath. The silence outside was gone, but the silence in our hearts was now deeper than ever. The decision was made. We would change our course. We would answer the whisper. First contact protocol was initiated. The words themselves sent a shiver through the entire Ark. It was a phrase from legend, a chapter in our history that was supposed to remain unread. Now, we were living it. The ship, for the first time in centuries, began to turn. The maneuver was slow, agonizing, a giant waking from an eon of slumber. The low hum of the engines changed pitch. It became a growl of effort and anticipation. Every system was checked and double-checked. Our small fleet of survey ships was prepped. Our medical bays were stocked. Our archives were backed up to redundant, shielded cores. We were preparing for wonders, and we were preparing for war. The protocol was a complex dance of hope and paranoia. We composed our own message to send in reply. A message of peace. A simple sequence of prime numbers, a map of our stolen star system, a recording of our children's laughter. It was the best of us, offered up to the unknown. We felt a profound shift in our purpose. For so long, our mission was to run, to flee the death of our star, to survive. Now, we were moving towards something, not away. The psychological change was immense. A current of nervous energy electrified the Ark. People gathered in the observation decks. They stared out at the unchanging blackness. But now it was different. It was no longer empty. It held a question, and we were the answer. We drilled for every possibility. A friendly greeting, a misunderstanding, a hostile response. We ran simulations of first contact scenarios. Most ended with our swift and efficient destruction. The computers were not very optimistic, but they lacked the one thing we had in abundance: stubborn, illogical hope. We had survived the end of our world. We had crossed the great dark. We were the children of a broken promise, and we refused to be afraid of a simple whisper in the night. The Ark pushed forward, a needle aimed at the heart of a mystery. We traveled toward the signal's source for years. The whisper grew stronger with every passing cycle. It was no longer just a sound. It was a presence, a feeling that washed over the ship's sensors, a sense of immense, quiet power. We analyzed it endlessly. We found patterns within patterns. It was a key, we realized, a key to a lock we could not yet see. The signal was not just a call. It was a guide. It was pulling us toward a specific point in space, a point that was, according to our charts, completely empty. Our long-range telescopes saw nothing, just the endless tapestry of distant stars and nebulae. But the signal was a beacon. It shone in a spectrum our eyes could not see. It sang in a frequency our ears could not hear. But the Ark's instruments could see and hear it perfectly. They told us we were approaching something massive, something that bent light around it, something that did not reflect any energy, a ghost on our screens, a hole in the universe. Our science officers were politely going insane. Then, we saw it. We dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Our proximity alarms screamed. The view on the main screen shifted. The starfield ahead of us was wrong. It was distorted, as if we were looking through a giant, invisible lens. And in the center of that distortion was the source of the signal, a structure of impossible scale. It was a gate, forged from the very fabric of space-time. It was blacker than the void around it, a perfect hexagon floating in the eternal night. It was immense. Our entire Ark was a speck of dust next to it. It did not seem to be made of any matter we knew. It was a shape carved out of reality itself. Lines of faint blue energy pulsed across its surface. They moved like rivers, flowing into the central abyss. The gate hummed, a low, resonant frequency that vibrated through our hull. It was the whisper, now grown into a clear, powerful voice. A voice of welcome and of warning. We had reached our destination. We had found the star-forged gate, and it was waiting for us. We drifted before the great gate. Our engines were silent. The entire Ark held its breath. The structure was beautiful and terrifying. It was a testament to a power we could not begin to understand. Our science teams were frantic. Their instruments failed to give any coherent readings. The gate was old, older than our sun, perhaps older than our galaxy. It was a work of star science far beyond our own. We were children who had stumbled upon a forgotten God's front door. We had no idea if we should knock. The blue energy lines on the gate pulsed faster. They seemed to be reacting to our presence. The central darkness of the gate swirled. When it was not empty, it was a doorway. A doorway to somewhere else. We had followed a whisper across the void. We had abandoned our long journey to a promised new home. All for this. All for an impossible artifact hanging in the dark. Our first contact protocol had no procedure for this. It was a situation beyond any of our cautious or wild imaginations. Then, from the gate, they emerged. They did not fly out in ships. They simply appeared, beings of pure light and woven metal. They were tall and slender. Their forms shifted like liquid mercury. Their heads were halos of soft, white light. No faces, no limbs as we understood them. They were living constellations. They moved with a grace that defied physics. They flowed through the vacuum toward us. We watched, frozen at our posts. Our weapon systems were powered, but no one even thought of firing. To shoot at them would be like shooting at the sunrise. They stopped a respectful distance from our ship, 3 of them. They hung in the void, radiating a profound sense of calm. Our communications officer reported that the signal had changed. It was no longer a broadcast. It was focused, directed at us, at our minds. Then we felt it. A touch, not physical. It was a gentle pressure inside our thoughts. A voice that did not use words. A presence that filled our consciousness. It was the Keepers, and they were speaking to us. Their thoughts were not like ours. They were concepts, emotions, pure data. They showed us who they were. They were an ancient race, the builders of the gate, the caretakers of this section of the galaxy. They were not gods. They were gardeners, and they had been waiting for us for a very long time. They felt our fear, our hope, our deep, abiding loneliness. They answered it with a feeling of welcome, a sense of finding a long-lost family. We tried to speak back, to project our own thoughts, to tell them our story, the story of our lost home, of our journey on the Ark. They listened. They understood. In their minds, we felt a deep sorrow for our loss, a sorrow that felt as old as the stars themselves. They knew what it was to lose a home. They had seen it happen 1,000 times before. They showed us they were not our saviors. They were our allies, because they needed our help. The calm welcome shifted. The gentle touch in our minds grew heavy. The Keepers showed us why they had called us. They shared a vision, not through a screen, but directly into our minds. We saw a galaxy full of life, worlds teeming with civilizations of every shape and form. We saw star-born empires rise and fall. We saw art and science and love on a scale we could not have imagined. It was a vision of a universe that was vibrant and loud, not silent and empty. This was the universe as it should be. Then the vision soured. A shadow fell upon it, a darkness that was not just the absence of light. It was an active, hungry nothingness. A great betrayal had allowed it to enter their galaxy. A betrayal by a race that sought power at any cost. They had opened a door that should have remained shut forever. And now, the devourer was loose. The Keepers showed us visions of worlds turning to gray dust, of stars being extinguished like candles, a silence spreading through the cosmos, a silence that was not peaceful, but filled with horror. They showed us why they had built the gate. It was a shield, a quarantine, an attempt to hold back the tide. But the enemy was patient. It was relentless. It gnawed at the edges of their reality. The Keepers were strong, but they were few. They were fighting a war of attrition they could not win alone. They showed us our own son's death. They revealed it was not a natural end. It was hastened, pushed over the edge by the distant ripples of this same encroaching darkness. Our extinction was a minor consequence of a much larger war. We felt a shattered trust, not in the keepers, but in the universe itself. We had thought our tragedy was our own, a simple random act of star science. To learn it was a casualty in a forgotten war. It was a profound violation. Our entire history was a lie. We were not just unlucky, we were victims. The anger that rose in us was cold and hard. The grief we had carried for so long found a new target. Not a dying star, but a living enemy. The enemy that had helped murder our world. The visions continued. We saw the enemy the keepers called the gloom. It was not an army of ships. It was not a creature of flesh and bone. It was a force of nature, a sentient plague of anti-existence, a hunger that consumed not just matter, but energy, light, and even thought itself. Where it passed, it left nothing behind, not even ruins. Just a perfect, smooth, featureless void. A hole in the universe where something used to be. The ultimate form of erasure. We saw it swarm over a solar system. It moved like a tide of black oil. Planets were submerged in moments. Their light, their heat, their gravity, all gone. The star at the system's heart fought back. It flared, lashing out with colossal energy. The gloom simply absorbed it. It drank the star's fire. The star withered. It collapsed in on itself, not with a bang, but with a silent whimper. The darkness had won, and it was still hungry. The keepers showed us how the gloom communicated. It did not speak. It did not think as we did. It projected despair, a crushing, soul-destroying hopelessness that weakened civilizations from within. It made them give up. It made them believe that fighting was pointless, that the only logical end to all things was nothingness. It was a weapon that targeted the will to live. Many worlds had fallen without a single shot being fired. They had simply opened their doors and let the darkness in. We recoiled from the vision. The mental touch of the keepers softened. They shared our horror. They shared our rage. They had fought this enemy for eons. They had watched countless friends and allies be consumed. They showed us why they had called us, not because of our technology, not because of our power, but because of what we carried. We carried the memory of a dead world. We carried a grief that had not broken us. We carried a stubborn, illogical hope. In a universe terrorized by despair, hope was the rarest and most powerful weapon of all. We were immune to the gloom's greatest weapon because we had already lost everything. And we were still fighting. An alliance was forged, not in a treaty room, but in a shared moment of understanding. Our fight for survival and their cosmic war were the same. We joined our technology with theirs. The keepers flowed around our ark. Their light and metal merged with our hull. They taught us their star science. They showed us how to see the universe as they did, as a place of energy and frequency, not just of matter and distance. Our ark was transformed. It was no longer just a refugee ship. It became a weapon, a vessel of vengeance and hope. The keepers integrated their systems with ours. Our simple fusion engines were augmented with conduits that drew power from the void itself. Our sensor arrays were tuned to detect the gloom's signature of despair. Our hull was reinforced with shimmering fields of energy. The Ark, our home, our cradle, our museum, became a warship, a fortress built from broken promises. We learned to work with the keepers. We became a single crew. Their minds guided our hands. Our ingenuity gave them new ways to fight. We designed weapons that fired concentrated hope, beams of energy encoded with our most powerful memories. The birth of a child, the feeling of sunlight, the sound of laughter. Things the gloom could not understand. Things that were poison to its nature of nothingness. Our grief was forged into a shield. Our love was sharpened into a sword. The Ark felt more alive than ever before. Its corridors hummed with a new power. We, the children of the twilight, felt a fire ignite within us. We were no longer running. We were no longer hiding. We had a purpose. We had an enemy. And we had allies who had seen the dawn of the universe. Together, we would stand against the encroaching night. We would not let another world fall. We would not let another sun be extinguished. The final battle for our new home had already begun before we had even found it. We would have to earn our dawn. The call to battle came. A system with twin suns was under attack. It was a major anchor point for the Keeper's defenses. A nexus of stargates that held the gloom at bay. If it fell, a dozen galaxies would be open to the hunger. The Keepers asked us to join them. There was no hesitation. We were ready. Our transformed Ark, now christened the Memory of Earth, took its place in their fleet, a single solid ship among a fleet of flowing, ethereal light. We were the iron fist in their velvet glove. We jumped through the star-forged gate. The journey was instantaneous. One moment we were in the void. The next we were in a system burning with the light of two stars. A blue giant and a yellow dwarf danced around each other. But their light was being devoured. A tide of the gloom was pouring into the system. A vast, amorphous cloud of absolute darkness. It was larger than any of us had imagined. The visions had not prepared us for the sheer scale of the enemy. The void erupted in silent fire. The Keeper fleet engaged. Lances of pure light struck the gloom. They seared its edges, but the wounds closed instantly. The darkness pushed forward, uncaring, unfeeling. It was like trying to fight the ocean. We saw Keeper ships, beings of light and energy, overwhelmed. Their light was snuffed out. One moment they were there, a brilliant star. The next, just nothing. The despair the gloom projected washed over us. It was a cold, heavy blanket. It whispered that we were fools, that our struggle was meaningless. We fought back. We fired our new weapons, beams of pure memory, concentrated hope. They struck the gloom. Where they hit, the darkness recoiled. It was not destroyed, but it was repelled. It was like oil and water. Our hope was anathema to its despair. We became the focus of the battle. The gloom turned its attention to us, the solid little ship that refused to break. The Ark shuddered as waves of nothingness crashed against our shields. The lights flickered. The hum of the engines faltered. But they held. Our grief was a strong shield. We pushed forward, a wedge of defiance into the heart of the shadow. The Keepers rallied around us. They used our presence as a shield. They protected our flanks while we drove a spear of hope into the enemy. The twin suns blazed behind us. We could feel their heat on our hull. The battle was not fought with sound and fury. It was a silent war of light against dark, of existence against erasure, of a single stubborn memory against an eternal, hungry void. We were fighting for our future and for everyone's past. We broke through. Our final, concentrated blast pierced the gloom's core. We had aimed all our power, all our memories of home, all our pain, and all our love. We fired it as one. The beam of light and memory struck something deep within the darkness. There was a silent implosion. The despair wave ceased. The vast cloud of nothingness began to dissolve. It did not explode. It just unraveled, fading away like smoke on the wind. We had done it. We had driven it back. The cost was staggering. The Keeper fleet was shattered. Less than a third of their ships remained. They flickered weakly in the light of the twin suns. We looked at our own status boards. The Ark was crippled. Our engines were dying. Our life support was failing. The energy channeled through our hull had burned out entire sections. We had won the battle, but we were bleeding out into the void. A Pyrrhic victory. We had driven the gloom back into darkness, but the price was our home. The Ark, the only world we had ever known, was dying around us. The remaining Keepers gathered around us. Their light was dim with exhaustion and grief. They touched our minds once more. There was no celebration, only a shared, profound sorrow. They thanked us. They told us that our sacrifice had saved more lives than we could ever count. They had not seen the gloom routed so completely in millennia. Our weapon, our hope, was more powerful than they had ever dreamed. But it had burned us out. Our commander, a woman born in the deep dark, transmitted our status. We had hours of life support left. Not enough time to repair the damage, not enough power to limp to the nearest safe harbor. We had traded our future for the galaxies. It was a bargain we did not regret. But the finality of it was a heavy weight. We had survived the end of one world. We would not survive the death of another. The long silence we had known for so long was returning. This time, it would be forever. The Keepers refused to let us die. They told us the promise would be kept, not the one we had made to ourselves, but one they were making to us now. They surrounded the Ark. Their light intensified. They poured their own energy into our ship. Not to repair it. It was too late for that. They were doing something else. They were preparing us for one last journey. A journey through the heart of the star-forged gate. They showed us a vision of our destination, a world that had been set aside, kept safe from the gloom, a green and blue marble orbiting a single, steady yellow sun. It was a home, a reward for our sacrifice, a promise of a new dawn. The star-forged gate loomed before us again. The Keepers guided our dying Ark toward its swirling vortex. They were our escort, our honor guard. The journey through the gate was not a journey through space. It was a journey through possibility. We saw timelines flicker past. We saw futures that could have been. We saw the ghosts of our ancestors smile. They were at peace. They knew their sacrifice, and ours had finally borne fruit. The Ark, our metal coffin, was becoming a seed, ready to be planted in new soil. We emerged into a new sky, a brilliant, impossible blue. Below us was a world of breathtaking beauty, continents of deep green, oceans of swirling sapphire, clouds of purest white. The air of this new world was clean and sweet. Our sensors confirmed it was perfect for us, a perfect match for the biology we had so carefully preserved. The Keepers had led us home, a home we had never known, but our hearts recognized it instantly. The promise was real. Our Ark began its final descent. It was no longer a ship. It was a monument, breaking apart as it fell. We evacuated in our landers and survey ships. We watched as the great needle, our home for so many generations, plunged into the vast ocean. It left a plume of steam and a circle of ripples. A final goodbye. A burial at sea for the last piece of our old world. We had built our Ark from broken promises. Now it was gone. We had to build our future from hope and stardust. We landed on the shores of a new continent. We stepped out onto soft grass. We felt warm sun on our faces for the first time. We breathed air that was not recycled. It was a dizzying, overwhelming experience. The children ran, laughing, their feet bare on the alien soil. They looked up at the sky, at the clouds, at the sun, with a wonder we could only dream of. This was their birthright, a world with a real sky. We did not forget our past. We built our first city from the salvaged pieces of our landers. We named it Memory. We established a council, a mix of the last sleepers and the Arkborn. We had a long way to go. We were few, and we were strangers in this new paradise. But we were not alone. The Keepers left us a single, small gate in orbit, a connection, a promise of friendship, and a reminder of the war that still raged in the darkness between the stars. Our fight was over for now. We had earned our peace. We would build our new home, and we would be ready if the darkness ever came again.